for you. And, we usually start you off doing some research on the feasibility of your idea. It's sort of similar to what probably some of the things we'll talk about tonight. And then, other areas, business planning covers a lot of different things. And, preparing, we're not lenders. We work with a lot of lenders and investors. So we connect folks to financing if you need financing to make things work. We help people understand their financial statements or just the financials and the cash flow of the business. I do a lot with, if people are familiar with the lean startup kind of movement and business model, Canvas business model generation, customer development, that sort of stuff is it's fun and exciting, innovative, creative. And I love to do a lot of work that way. We connect also with a lot of resources at URI. You'll hear from Dee Dee in a little bit. So I work closely with Dee Dee on a lot of different things, which I won't steal her thunder. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of who we are. And it works on this sort of sweat equity DIY kind of model. Folks come and they are working on their business, and we're working right alongside to help them grow and succeed.
So for me, a couple things. One is, the things we're hinting upon and what Josh had just said. Normally they have this whole session that was like a half a day event that they would do that now is being presented in webinars. So it's an incredible opportunity as far as accessibility goes, because I think for a lot of us, we're talking tonight at 7:00 at night. Some of us have had a full workday, others have been tending to whatever we needed to at home. So this flexibility with the webinars, I think, is huge on creating access on this topic. The other thing, and this is, and you can correct me, Josh, but in my mind, what I think about with the RISBDC is that it's kind of, for me, like a first stop for people, and then like a number 4 or 5 stop. Like, I feel like a lot of people like, this is an entryway, this is a comfortable conversation. How do I know what else is within my reach for resources? And then as I get started, I come back and have another follow-up conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes different shapes. It kind of is this hybrid between a coaching or consulting or counseling kind of model. So it takes the shape of what people are looking for. If it's a particular project, if we're helping you develop a loan package for a lender, that's a discrete consulting project that we're going to help you put all that together. Or it's going to be, you started and you need that ongoing coaching, once a month or something like that. That's something that we do as well with business owners and executives.
Great. So let's introduce URI Innovate. And Dee Dee, I'm going to unmute you right now. But Dee Dee Chatham is the director of URI Innovate. And like Josh said, a lot of times these two work hand in hand. So we wanted to make sure we took a step to highlight this as being one of your great resources for launching or even thinking about launching your business. Dee Dee?
Hi, thanks everybody. Nice to see you, Josh and Audra. And so yes, Josh and I have worked together for a few years now. He and Innovate at URI, and the Launch Lab really is sort of a new piece that we opened up in the last year or so at URI, which is really sort of the mission of the Launch Lab is to equip URI students, faculty, and alumni with an entrepreneurial mindset and the innovation skills so that they can go out and create meaningful impact in their careers and in their communities. And so there's quite a lot of programming that we have going on there now. And when we get back to campus face to face, you'll find us just inside the door of the main library. So we are, we're there to help connect people to the resources that they need. And we have a pathway on which, people can connect in. Depending on where they are in the process. Maybe they just have an idea that they want to pursue. Maybe they have a prototype. maybe they've already started a business, and wherever they are, we sort of meet you there, wherever you are on that pathway. So that's our basic mode of operation. There's several pieces of programming. We have our Mentor Connect program, which is really an office hours program. Josh has been a mentor in that for a few years now. And the way that works is it's a group session. So there'll be Josh and usually 4 or 5 other experienced entrepreneurs around the table, and you can make an appointment, come in and speak with them about your idea and how to move it forward. Now, when I'm talking about ideas, I'm talking about sometimes we're helping you move that to a new venture, a new startup. Sometimes it's moving your idea to a research project. Sometimes it's to a social enterprise. So it's like we're helping you figure out where it can go. Other things that we do is we have speakers. We have a series of workshops around ideation and design thinking and business modeling and intellectual property and more. And then we run events like hackathons to help people really get practice with creating ideas and moving them forward. We have a program called Guppy Tank. Josh has also participated in that as a pitch coach on a number of occasions, which is really great. It's a milder version of Shark Tank, which most people are familiar with, and it's friendly advice and pitching practice. So that's, yeah, so you can find us inside the library right in the front door there. And then for right now, you can find us at the website that you see on the screen, which is uri.edu/innovate.
So what I love about both of these resources, like this, the whole series is about accessibility. And I think there's a lot of things that intimidate us, which is why we had the first conversation on ideas, because that might be your stuck point. Like I have it, I think about it, but I don't know where to start. And similarly as resources saying, I need the support to get started. Like, I'm ready, let's keep going. But knowing that there is the Rhode Island Small Business Development Center sitting at URI, as well as URI Innovate and the Launch Lab at URI, to me, that makes it that warmer connection and just a little bit more comfortable to start making this happen if you're ready to pursue it. Thank you, Dee Dee.
Thanks. Thank you.
So next, I want to highlight customers. This is definitely, obviously, one of the big areas. And it was a lot of what we were talking about last week, but we didn't get to go deep enough. And I think it's okay. Questions, and a lot of our questions were around ourselves and starting to ask about the motivation to start a business, and then starting to say about how could we connect with the customers. So it was really the beginning conversation, and I'd like Josh to go deeper into it. We had different perspectives. I think we had people who had businesses that had an established customer base that they took on, others that really worked to grow and target, and then we had other people who were basically discovered by their customers. By kind of really pursuing their interests, customers found them. Tell us, how do we do this? How do we find a customer? How does this work?
So, and I'd love to hear, if folks want to share in the chat what kinds of things you're working on or thinking about working on, a little bit more about who your customers are. As I talk, tell us a little bit more about that, because I'd love to keep it two ways. So yeah, I mean, I think that if you don't have a customer, you don't have a business, right? I mean, that's Peter Drucker, who was a sort of management guru, wrote tons of books and was at a Presidio graduate school of management for years and years, sort of known as a guru, says the purpose of a business is to create a customer, right? So that's what you're doing. Is if you an idea without a customer is an idea, right? An idea without a way to actually deliver it and create some value for someone who will pay you for it isn't a business. It's something else, and that's cool if it's something else. But customers are the most important. So you want to figure out, or try to have an idea who early on. And like you said, Audra, I mean, it's cool if they find you. If you just start doing something you love and they find you, that's a super cool experience. But a lot of times you have to have that two-way street, right? Where you go kind of searching for a customer. I might have an idea, but then I got to figure out, who wants this? Like whose problem am I solving? And whose life am I making better or easier or, whatever, right? Who's, is there something out in the market already that they're using and it's not working out well, right? I could do it better. These are kind of ways that you can start to generate and refine those ideas. So you're wanting to figure out who it is, and in thinking about you've got this bullet point about customer personas. So really, that's getting a lot of times people say. When they come to us early on, they'll say, "Oh, everyone's my customer." Well, so that's it may be true at some level. What you're doing may be ultimately like mass market appeal. Anyone could be your customer, but that's not a good place to start from, because I can't say go out and say, "Hey, everyone in the world, here's my business." I have to be more proactive and targeted. So getting the customer persona is really targeted about who's the group or groups that I'm kind of going after, and what defines them as, and how do I understand their motivations, their values, what triggers them to go looking for some solution, right? Talk about those pains, talking about jobs that they are trying to accomplish, right? These are the things you start to try to drill down on about who your customer is. I'm seeing a comment from Jackie.
Yeah, so we have one good example here, which is wanting a business that is both beneficial to the public and educates the younger generation and people in need of basic skill like cooking or computer programming to integrate more into the workforce. So really, education, meeting needs, workforce piece.
Yeah.
And then there's another one on business to business and business to consumer. So we have a couple of good examples.
Okay, great. So yeah, I mean, I think the social benefit, public benefit is definitely a bigger drive now, and certainly with a younger demographic is a huge drive. I mean, folks my age and younger probably buy more based on values than anyone before them, certainly more than boomers. So anyone millennial or younger is driven by those values. So, but you still have to figure out, what's the problem that I'm solving for them? Can I get specific about that? Can I get specific about what other opportunities do they have, right? That they're currently paying for, or, there's a lot of problems you can solve that you may be solving a problem, but someone might not be willing to pay for it. So that's a tricky thing. If you want to start a business, you have to figure out how the heck, you're going to get paid for it. So, so then the question, the idea of business to business versus business to customer, those are different dynamics. I think about that customer persona as, again, there's demographic stuff, what age group am I looking at? Is it men more than women, or other, otherwise some different group? Is it particular geography that I'm bound by? Am I trying to start, a business that's sort of a known quantity? I'm trying to start a pizza place or fitness coaching or like whatever else it might be. Those are kind of generally known quantities, right? And I don't have to educate my customer too much. Versus I'm trying to start something that's new and innovative, and I have to figure out, how this solves problems for folks. So anyway, that's I think business to business. I think about it as you then start to think about what they call your decision-making unit. So when I'm doing business to business, it's not just my customer. I also have this other surrounding influence of that customer. So I have not just the one who pays me, but I might have the one who uses my product or service might not be the one who pays me, right? So that's very true in you can look at like nursing homes, right? That's one example, or services for kids, right? Like your user is the kid or is the older person living in the nursing home, but sometimes the person paying you is the parent or the adult child in that situation, right? You've got someone who has in an institutional setting, organizational, business to business, business to organization. You've got all sorts of hierarchies, right? You've got someone who has control of the budget. You've got someone who has, veto power over whether they can choose you or someone else, right? You've got someone who may actually be the end user of what you're doing. So you want to think about, who are those people and how do they interact with what you do and how do you create value for each of them and how do you create, and especially can you zero in on who it is that I'm really creating the most value for, especially in B2B, and who I need to be targeting. You can waste a lot of time and energy in B2B going after people who are not your customer. So that's a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I was like,
but there's two things I'm going to kind of focus in on. One is there's this little sparkly hope. I tend to be somebody who has a lot of experience with nonprofits. I always want to help the person who needs help. And then if you are like me and you want to help the people who need help, I think a lot of times what comes back to you is, do those people have money? And they may not be because they're the ones who need the help. But I appreciate what you're saying, Josh, which is that, okay, the service is of value. There is a consumer. Is that consumer willing to pay? Maybe not. But is somebody else in that pipeline willing to pay? So maybe me going and saying, I'm going to do career services for people who are unemployed. You say, well, they're unemployed. That might be challenging. But if I go and I approach another group that works with unemployed individuals, I could become that contractor, or I could create a program, or I could, present something so that I get funded through them. So I think that's one part that I like I said, it has that that hope for all of us who want really something that might be a social enterprise.
Absolutely.
The other part is, going off of the person who wants to do business to business and talking, they had a follow-up that they're looking at selling advertising to businesses and then merchandise to consumers. When I'm trying to get more focused on my customer, is there part that happens for me? Like, does just kind of this trial and error, and I throw this marketing out there and then I see who focuses in, or I see where the response is, and then use that as my guide, or is that going backwards?
Yeah, no, I think you've got a lot of great resources here on this slide, and a lot of them are sort of in that what I call lean startup and customer discovery world. So a lot of them, it's getting some ideas, some hypotheses about who your customer is, and then going out and testing them, like you're saying. How do I figure out a way to test that out, to see if I can, get them to do something, right? So that's what a lot of these resources are about. How do I get in front of customers? How do I engage customers early and often? Like I think maybe that quote is maybe from me or from our website. I certainly believe it. And really you're testing to see if what I'm solving for is a strong pain point. I'm testing for if the way that I'm offering it is desirable. I'm testing for if my language to try to, my value proposition, what they call, why the differentiator, why me, why they choose me. I love that point that you made, Audra, about, sometimes you're going one direction, but there's actually another group of people who would pay you to reach this other group. So you could create value and help this other group, like you're saying, in the B2B example, right? Like the value of connecting to one group and creating value for them could be monetized not by that group, but by, you know, the businesses that want to reach those customers, right? So there's the idea of all of this is start with those hypotheses. How do I turn them into tests, you know, and depending on what you're doing and how new and how, you know, how much you don't know, you have to test more, right? If you don't know, if you're doing something really innovative, really new, I have to test a lot of different things before I take too many steps. I want to de-risk a lot of that. But if I know it, I might have to just test a few things. Can I actually, like you've got examples here, can I do a website landing page? Can I do Facebook ads? Can I do some sort of, you know, test that actually draws people in some way to see, hey, if I put this out there, this is the number of people who click through. Well, now I have some data that tells me, oh, there's actually some interest in that, right? So that's definitely the idea.
And we have another great example of that. On Thursday, we have a pair, and they're a mentor-mentee pair, and they're talking about the person whose business it is has a tech business, and it initially started in one direction. They just figured out, gosh, that really wasn't right, but they took a lot of those lessons, created a different one, really feel good about it, and now as they have developed it, they really have started to discover all these other potential clients within it, that because of the technology they're using and it's essentially a communication tool, that it can be used in these other areas, and they're testing it out there, and they've used a partnership, which is really cool. So there is a comment. Can You app built by URI students is a platform to enable testing of new ideas. And I'll put that in the notes out to people, because Can You is KANU. And I will share that. So thank you, Dee Dee. So business model canvas, this is something actually I know Dee Dee talks a lot about. Josh, you were already referencing the idea of lean businesses. And I think if you're somebody who's thought of a business and someone has said, tell me about your business plan, once again, we go into that intimidate, like that's so big. Why do you like this? What's a business model canvas or the lean business model?
So I think a lot, I frequently say, I like it quite a bit, and it's a one-page tool, as you can see, this visual tool, for mapping out your business model, right? So your business model is not necessarily your business plan. Your business model is, in a nutshell, it's how you create, deliver, and capture value, right? So it's the core elements of what value you're creating and who you're creating it for. So there, you know, in the middle, you can see value proposition. What's the value you're creating? Customer segments, who are you creating it for? Channels, how are you reaching them, right? How are you delivering that value? And then how are you capturing that? What revenue streams you've got? How are you creating it in terms of the left-hand side? You've got the key partners, activities, and resources. What does it take to create that value, right? The right-hand side is more of the delivery, you know, the customer engagement piece of it, right? So the reason I like it, you know, folks, when they're first starting out, a lot of times people say, oh, well, you have to write a business plan. That may be true, that has some value, but I often say, and as we said, you don't have a business if you don't have a customer. Who wants to see your business plan? So sometimes a lender wants to see it. Sometimes a spouse wants to know, our partner wants to know they're not, you know, losing their, you're not crazy. Maybe a landlord wants to see it. You know, maybe a business partner wants to think it through together. Those are all valuable things. But there's one important group of people who rarely, if ever, ask to see your business plan, and that's your customer, right? Your customer is rarely going to ask to see your business plan, but your customer is the most important, most vital piece of the success of your business. So this, and a lot of times a business plan is, you sit in your room, you know, or whatever, you know, slaving away and writing, you know, night after night, just dumping things into it. And there's some value to that. I don't want to, you know, just dismiss doing that research, thinking things through. But the thing that often ends up with is whatever length business plan you've got, it then just sort of ends up on a shelf a lot of times. It doesn't really turn into anything actionable, right? And especially if you're trying to do something new that hasn't been done before, you can't just research it by, going out and doing industry and market research in the traditional secondary ways, getting some information from databases or the library. Those things, again, are valuable, but they're not geared towards action, and they're not geared towards testing your ideas and figuring out what works and what doesn't. That's the business model canvas, and the tools around it are this way of capturing those ideas and the way how your business hangs together, and really designed towards testing those ideas. So I have some ideas about who my customer is. I have some ideas about what they want, what problem I'm solving, what I'm creating for them, how I'm going to reach them, what they're going to pay, in what way. Are they paying in a subscription? Are they paying in a one-off? Are they paying a fee for a particular service or product? Those are all things that are potentially testable, and important to test, especially if you're doing something that's new and innovative. So that's the reason I like this set of tools, is because it's a little more, I think it fits a little better with the entrepreneurial process, which is, to get quickly to the idea, the core of the idea, and how it's a business, not just an idea. Again, it has to have a customer. I have to be solving a problem or creating some value for them. Well, then I want to figure out, okay, if I think that I've got this customer and this, value that I'm creating, then, I better try and figure out how I can test that out if they actually care about it. Because if they don't, I can waste a lot of time and money trying to solve something that doesn't matter, right? I need to get in front of them and figure out, does it matter? Okay, tell me more, like how what's your current solution? What's working with it? What's not? All that engagement. So that's the next piece of the business model canvas, is the ideate, put the ideas down, how does this thing hang together, and then go test.
So I put out a question to everyone, and I'll say it out loud, and you can type or you can unmute yourself. But my question is, what are the companies or services that you find give you the most value? And I got a response that it says, I want to give people a sense of community and desire to learn. I didn't have that during my teen years, and it made college hard. I want to help others who may be in the same boat as I was. And I'm going to oversimplify this huge, but what I really appreciate and what I'm thinking about is that if there was a company or a product or a service connected with that, it's that sense of belonging. So in value proposition, is sense of belonging always a component, or is that just that's a certain customer base that would say, I want to belong to something, whether that is a super exclusive private club, or whether that is a grassroots community, or whether that is something that's really niche on my interest? How important is belonging in my business and in starting a business?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great example, Jackie, and good questions. So, I mean, I think there's another related tool to this that we use to drill down a little bit more into that, who your customer is and what the value proposition is. It's called the value proposition canvas. Same folks who kind of built out this business model canvas did that piece. And that gets into, what kinds of what they call what jobs your customer is engaging in, right? And so there's social jobs or social things that we're trying to accomplish. And one of those key things is belonging, right? So if you create a community, there is value to that. The question of whether and in what ways you can actually be compensated for that, there's lots of ways that we create community that we don't get compensated for. So you have to think a little bit about, you know, what pieces of it may be the community that you creates a ton of value, but that may not be the piece that you can actually, you know, capture through some sort of payment, right? So you may want to keep that piece of it, you know, free so that you build the community in a more natural way, but there may be some other piece that you monetize. That's an open question. I mean, sometimes people will pay for to be parts of certain communities. They pay membership fees to be part of certain communities. But what you're describing sounds a little less like folks would pay to be a part of it, and more, it might be more like what Audra was saying before. If you create that place for belonging, it may be another organization, another, you know, group of people who value and want to reach that community and offer them something as well, and that may be a monetized part of what you do. So thinking about who those key partners are is maybe a key portion of what you do.
Well, and that sounds like it fits really well with the business model canvas. Like you said, the key partners, and we talked about this in the ideas piece, saying, you know, part of starting an idea does not mean I have to be able to do everything, but it's recognizing here's what I'm good at, and here's where I need that support or expert or someone external to me. So when I think of the business model canvas, one of the things I'm thinking about is I work with people all the time who are on a job search. And I think about the process of searching as kind of like a scaffolding of skills and scaffolding of preparing myself. So I write a resume and that gives you a summary of who I am. And I have a cover letter and that lets me go deeper. And I do a little prep. And all of this starts to help me when I'm having that conversation, hopefully with you on an interview. I'm looking at the business model canvas in a similar way, that if I can use this as a map and ask myself these questions, then maybe when I come to talk to you, or I go to URI Innovate in the Launch Lab, or another one of these resources will highlight, that I can just kind of start the conversation maybe a step further.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, there's another variation. There's another book and set of tools from these same folks. They're on a roll with this stuff, but they have another book called Business Model U, as in YOU, and it's almost exactly about that. It's about using some of these same mindsets for career development and personal development. And I like to think about it as there's a variation on this that I mentioned, which is called the lean canvas. So the lean canvas changes a few things around with this. You know, it's less the left-hand side of the canvas where it says key partners, key activities, key resources. The lean canvas drops those off and instead focuses in more on the problem of the core problems that your customers are facing. What's your solution and your offering, and what are the key metrics? How are you going to measure whether you've actually been successful in solving that or getting people to, you know, move in that direction? So I think about it as another key thing that you need to develop as you start developing your idea is a pitch, right? Just an elevator pitch of some sort, right? And I like to use the lean canvas as a little bit of a script for that kind of pitch, right? It works like a marketing pitch. So your customer segments, I know you, I know who my customer is, I know who, you know, who I'm solving for. I know their problems, I know their pains. I know, you know, I've seen why what's called the next best alternative, you know, doesn't work. You know, it's not solving that problem for them. This is my solution. This is why, this is what the offering looks like, how it's packaged. You know, that's your solution you're offering. You know, this is why it's better. This is my value proposition. This is why me instead of the next best alternative, right? This is how I reach my customers. This is how I, you know, reach a number of them, right? And then this is how I grow the thing, and how I make money, right? If you can answer all of those questions, you've answered a lot about a business, right? You have a good sense. If you can even ask those questions and say, who is my customer? What problem am I solving? What is their alternative? Am I better than their alternative? You know, really honestly look at that. Those are hard questions, and they also cut through a lot of the, I'll just be frank about it, a lot of the BS of what startup business planning looks like. People BS themselves all the time in startup business planning.
And one of the things that I'll highlight was something one of our speakers last week referenced, which was to say to the what are the alternatives? He was commenting about the opportunity you have if you're a student. That if you're a student, you can very comfortably talk to those alternatives, those potential competitors, and learn a lot more. And so you can learn about how can I be different than them. And I think that's a unique opportunity.
For sure, no question.
So one of the major questions, and I think this, I definitely wanted to spend time because I think it's probably one of the first questions you get is, I have a great idea. I want to get started. Now, is there a grant for me because I am a woman, I'm a minority, I'm of a certain age? Is there something that applies to me, but gosh, I don't think I can ever do it because of financing. So I'm going to use this as a two-part question. One being, do I have to have a bunch of money to start a business? And then the second being, if I need money, what do I do?
Those are both great questions and both really core questions. So I give the horrible answer, it depends, for the first one. But I'll qualify what it depends on. So certain types of businesses, certain types of business models are more expensive to start than others, right? Certain things you can bootstrap, certain things you can't, right? And so really, but there was an experiment that they did at MIT where they gave students an envelope with I don't know, it was like $20, $100, something relatively minimal, and said, go start a business. Here's your seed capital, right? And what they actually found, this was the counterintuitive type of thing. What they actually found was that the most successful students in starting their businesses didn't open the envelope. So that's kind of a crazy thing, right? So the idea is, you oftentimes think, oh, I want to start a business, I have to get money, right? I have to get money from an investor, from a bank, whatever, right? Well, the trick is, if you're a pure startup, going to a bank can be a tough thing to do, right? If you have an unproven business model, an unproven business, it can be a tough thing to do. That said, there are lenders that are out there, SBA lenders, who work with startups, and we help with that as well. So if that's the route you do go down, it's not impossible, but but oftentimes startups, you're doing it on some mix of your own personal savings that you can kind of put in to play around with a little bit. Some mix of what they call friends, family, and fools, who you can kind of not trick into giving you money, obviously, but are there people who could support you, right? Could you do a crowdfunding campaign or a pre-sale kind of campaign? These are ways of generating some startup capital. And there are, for-profit businesses, there are not an awful lot of grants out there. There are grants. They're very specific usually. Like you mentioned, they're sometimes for women-owned businesses, sometimes for minority-owned businesses, sometimes for particular industries or types of businesses, or sometimes through cities or towns that have particular programs that they get money from, the government to do, or things like that. But really, one of the core things of that, bootstrapping thing, the lean sort of startup, is, can I get to my customer early and often? Can I figure out, if I can figure out something they really want and start developing it, well, then I'm quicker to getting to a place where my customers are going to pay me, because that's really the most sustainable sort of financing. That's not always the way. Sometimes you have to go out and raise money. So, but you have to think about, what am I giving up for raising that money? So I have to think, what are the core things that I need to pay for to start this thing up? Can I do it in a, let me give an example that I think will give a better idea of what this looks like for kind of more Main Street small businesses. So I've worked with a number of different retail and restaurant businesses. And I get tons of folks who say, I want to start a restaurant and or retail, and they go, and the first thing they do is, and they say, I need to get a loan, and I'm going to sign a lease right now, and I need all this startup inventory, and I need all these things. So it's cost, 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 cost. So you're guaranteed to owe people money from the beginning. But what you're not guaranteed is to get paid by anyone, right? So that is a challenging place to start from. But if you can flip that model, if I can get to customers quicker, cheaper, earlier, then I can, if I don't have to jump straight into a lease, right? So one example is, if you're familiar with PV Donuts, great small business, love what they do. So craft donuts, right? Like it's a thing, it's a trend. It's well on past a trend, but so what they did was before they ever, instead of saying, okay, got to start a business, got to go get a loan, got to sign a lease, got to get equipment inventory, got to get all these things. What they did first, start an Instagram page, right? Start a social media page or pages, and start creating content, right? So before they ever sold a donut, before they ever had to get any, licenses from the Department of Health or whatever else, they were able to start making these donuts, these really creative donuts. They have an awesome brand. They had some skills in branding and marketing, right? So those are some skills that, if you want to start a business, it's great to go get to build up those skills in branding and marketing, because that's an often first, set of skills that you use. So they built out this awesome Instagram following, right? Didn't spend a lot of money. They were just making donuts at home, didn't have to do it in a commercial kitchen, didn't have to pay for all of that. Making these donuts, building up a huge following because they did these super creative recipes, really, colorful, awesome images on Instagram. Start that out, get hundreds of followers on Instagram, and then only after they've got people saying, oh my gosh, I have to have those. When can I have those? Oh my gosh, like, where are you going to set up? Take all my money, right? Like that's a great indicator that you've got something worth going after, right? When you're getting that kind of feedback. Well, then they didn't jump into a lease in a space. They did pop-ups, right? So they did pop-ups and they partnered with a bunch of bars and other sort of entities, right? So donuts, they're selling them in the morning. The bars are open at night. Works out. You could have a partnership, right? You can pay a little bit, and use the space, or if you got a friendly relationship, maybe it's a sort of a gift to you as an entrepreneur. Whatever it is, they could start out that way, and then they did these pop-up events, built up the buzz about it, got people super excited about it, lines around the block, right? And now they're selling out every single time they have a pop-up. They have cool, creative menus, different menus every single time, all the things around marketing, right? Scarcity, limited time, limited quantity, till we sell out, right? It's all those things that drive people to actually, take the plunge and do it, right? And then only after they did that for quite a while, doing those pop-ups, selling out every single time, did they actually move into a retail space. And even then they use it more like the kind of pop-up ethos, right? They have like new menus all the time. They have new stuff coming. They only sell until they sell. They're only open until they sell out. So it still keeps that like buzz of, but you think about that, they could have come and said, I have to start a business. I need $50,000 for all these costs, but they flipped the model. And by flipping the model, they didn't need all those things before they started getting customers excited and then customers paying, right? So I want you to think about that in terms of what you're doing as a startup. I think that's a great way to if you can, think that way. Or crowdfunding can be a great way to do that. I have another client who did a consumer like home goods product, right? And he had a design background, super cool product, very well designed, had that skill set, right? He did a crowdfunding campaign because, building out this thing, the manufacturing of this would be super expensive and time consuming. Well, what he did with the crowdfunding, built a great marketing campaign around the crowdfunding, raised, over $35,000 on the crowdfunding campaign because he did it really well. It takes, to think about it as a marketing campaign, takes a lot of work. He did that. And then he turned around and said, okay, not only do I have $35,000 to go do my first run of these products and then fulfill those orders, right? Now I can go turn around and go to a bank, which he did, and say, not only do I have that money, but I also have that group of customers who've already proven out that there's a market for what I'm doing. So he could turn around and go to the bank and get $150,000 to do the next level up, right? So, but versus if you went to the bank and said, hey, just give me $150,000, you won't regret it. It's.
Well, and I love this because I think, once again, if we go into how can I take the steps? How can I take the intimidation off? Maybe it's, let me test my idea in this easier space before I invest a ton of time, a ton of money, or that sweat equity. There's going to be an investment, even if I haven't poured money into it. So the idea of I can start building the social media, but then I can also test my product in these pop-up shops or in these partnerships before I make a commitment. I think that's a huge, huge resource. We had a great question that was
creative with it. Sorry, go. If you're creative with it, it can be even cheaper, right? Like you can use Facebook ads, or you can use. So I'm a friend of mine, James Kwan, who started Figment's digital marketing. They're a great firm in Providence. He does something he calls the $100 test. So just give yourself a little budget and say, what could I do creatively within this tiny budget to test out my idea to see if it would work? He gives the example of Tim Ferriss, who is a great author who wrote The 4-Hour Work Week, went and tested the idea for what his next book should be. The way that he tested it was to print out book jackets and go to a bookstore and put his book jackets around other people's books and then sit there and see how many people came along and picked up his book. If they picked up his book, it's a check. If they like start looking inside, it's another check. If they brought it up to the register, it's like, a huge check, right? That's a super cheap thing to do, but you actually see what do people do, And so with some creativity and with digital marketing, social media kind of stuff and what other, tools like that, it's the limits are really just your creativity for creating these kinds of tests. Anyway,
so we have a question, and then I'm gonna drill down on you here, and then we're almost at the end of our time. Would you say that the worry of obtaining startup capital could end up being an albatross for those who don't have a clear vision for attracting customers?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I think it becomes it can become an impediment. It can become a barrier. It can become, the thing that stops you from taking the next step. Oh, but I need to, bet my retirement. Oh, but I need to go get a loan. That's why I think creatively. What could I do? And there's resources out there for thinking that way, right? In this lean startup customer discovery, the guys who did the business model canvas and the book that's around that, business model generation, just came out with a new book, or recently came out with a book called testing business ideas. And their whole thing is then how do you do these kinds of tests? So many different ways to test that, right? Don't let capital be necessarily the impediment. If you can test these things out and prove you have a customer, you'll start to be able to find capital. Now that said, lenders are usually, they're a different type of animal. Lenders are looking for known entities. They're looking for, because they don't get any of the upside. So they just, they have to, they don't want to hear any risk. They want to hear, I know that you've been in business. I know you're in a, industry that's not going to have a huge upended, situation. So it's.
I have a final question I want to ask on this one, and then I'm going to move on. what are my bare minimums? So let me say that I have a business that I'm going to be consulting and it's totally based off of my expertise. Or I'm going to use something like Teespring or merch on Amazon where I don't have, it's my idea, but I don't have to pay for anything. Like it's going through a company, it's free. So if all that stuff is free, the big stuff, what are my very bare minimum costs to say I'm a business?
So not too many. You know, if your model is lean like that, so you can, in terms of starting a business, you can be a sole proprietorship, which is just you doing business as you. There's no legal entity. Depending on what you're doing, if you're selling food or doing things like that, then there's other, you know, things you need to do. You need to get certain licenses. You need to, if you're selling food in Rhode Island, you need to work in a commercial kitchen to produce it. But other things, if you are consulting, like you said, you can really you want to go down to the city or town, or these days it's virtual, but you know, contact your city or town. You can set up as a sole proprietorship. It's really little to no expense to do that piece of it. You can set up an employer identification number with the IRS for free. If you did actually want to start a legal entity, an LLC or an S corporation or something like that, protect your assets, you know, give you mitigate some risk for you. It's you can pay a lawyer to do that, and it's not a bad idea to talk to an attorney. There's also a lot of resources and information out there about the different forms of business. The actual cost of the forms that you have to fill out and file with the state are really relatively minimal. It's $150 for filing an LLC form with the state of Rhode Island, and $230 for an S corporation. You know, and then you pay lawyers' hours if you have to sit down with an attorney. So it can be relatively minimal to get going, and then it's your creativity. Can I, you know, do it cheaper? Can I do it without spending everything to find out, you know, to find out it didn't work, right?
So I just want to highlight these, and like I said, I'm gonna send them to everybody, the slides, but there are organizations that are national. You know, you had talked about having a commercial kitchen, and so these are resources. I mean, we're at a really interesting time where I think so many groups have come together to say we want to help entrepreneurs. So you have something, I think it's on my next slide, where I specifically talk about Hope in Maine, and Hope in Maine's a commercial kitchen, and they're not the only one. So there are companies and organizations that are coming up saying, come to us as a collective, whether that is shared office space or whether that is a cooking space. I know these are ones that we've talked a little bit about. You'll have the links so you can dig a little deeper. But Josh and I had gone back and forth. These are also a bunch of the ones that he recommends for individuals who are looking for that next step after a conversation with you.
And of course, you know, there's we're here for you as well. You know, whether through our webinars or through our staff who can help out as well. So, yeah, take advantage of the resources. They're out there. You know, in terms of the amazing thing is that now with YouTube, with, you know, Google, with a lot of other resources, there's so many things at your fingertips. And some of the things that we mentioned are just available widely and many free.
And I think it goes into a different culture or a different community where I know one of the ones that we have the mentor-mentee duo that's speaking on Thursday. One of theirs that they met at was Venture Cafe. And then we have another person, Javanya Allen, who has her whole business is networking. She has a business called Twisted Networking. She's speaking on Friday. Center for Women in Enterprise was one of the ones that really helped her with the start of her business. So this, once again, bunch of different resources that we will send out to you all, but this is like, as I dig into things, that's some of the pieces that really resonate with me, is that there's a community of people that want to help, some as a business, others who just say, welcome to entrepreneurship. I wanted somebody to help me. Let me be that person for you. Some more, and a lot of these came from my previous time connecting with Josh. One that he just mentioned was Google. Grow with Google has a whole series. We had a woman, Sixia Devine, who is a URI alum. She's one of the presenters with Grow with Google. She had spoken a little while for the College of Business. There's freelancers, so to the point where I can't necessarily do everything. A lot of what Josh was saying, we could test things very cheap by really doing some marketing. Maybe I'm great at marketing, but if that's the thing I'm not great at, that might be my first person I meet that I can connect and either have a private consultation to get ideas, or this might be somebody I even hire, depending on how it goes. One of the ones I love is Chris Guillebeau. And Chris Guillebeau has a book called $100 Startup and Side Hustle Nation. He has a podcast that is Side Hustle. It's the Side Hustle podcast. I love it because they are 10 minutes. You can sort through them. There's tons of different areas. And then with each one, he talks about the idea. The person gives some updates. They tell you the numbers, and they tell you the resources they use. But for me, that's like one of my fun idea generators as I'm driving in the car, thinking about all the things that would be exciting to kick off. And so lastly, I just want to, I know we're a couple minutes over, but I want to just take a minute to say, what didn't we touch upon, or what do you want to talk a little bit more about? You have Josh on the line right now, so if you want to type a question in or unmute yourself, feel free. I think a nice, healthy reminder that there's tons of resources. You don't have to get lost in them, but taking action. And that was a lot of our conversation last week, was like, take a step. And just kind of feel it out.
Yeah, Dee Dee's made some great points there. I think you're right. It's take action, take the first step. You learn from it. You make a mistake, and as Dee Dee said also earlier, actually having a place where you have a paying customer is a huge step if you can get to that place.
So Josh, I'm going to have you just close us out with a piece of advice then. You talk to people all the time who are on that startup phase. You see a lot of the things that get caught up. What is one piece of advice that you can share with people to really motivate them to take action?
Yeah, I think the using these tools is huge. I think if you've got something that you're passionate about, something that you want to figure out, something that a dream you wanted to follow, a business you wanted to start, or you've stumbled into something, I think take those steps, whatever it is, and take some action. Use these tools as much as they're helpful, but really don't let that stand in the way, like Dee is saying, of taking action. And really, if you take the action in a way that's, it's not, a lot of people think entrepreneurship is about people who are just wildly risky, right? And just take, wild flail, and hope something sticks. No, it's really, how can I creatively test out my idea and do it in a way that, get some feedback. Even if you get feedback that's negative, if it's helpful, if it actually, helps you refine what you're doing, figure out that's not the path I want to go on, redefine failure. Failure is not finding out you were wrong. That's learning, right? Failure is giving up because I keep trying to do the same thing over and over again and it doesn't work. Well, you got to change things, right? So go for it. Go for it. That's absolutely the big advice.
So Dee Dee, I just unmuted you. Do you have any final advice you want to share too?
Oh, hi, sorry. I was trying to speak before, but I found the chat box, so that was great. Q&A, I guess. Yeah, just no. I mean, it's been a great hour. Thank you so much, Josh and Audra, and ditto to everything. Get started. I mean, yeah, people think they're, entrepreneurs are risk lovers. Actually, they're experts at reducing risk. That's what they do really well at. So it's always out there, and you just got to get better at that. But get started.
And I'll write out one of the pieces of advice earlier because we had someone talking about why now is actually a great time to start a business. And I think if you're risk adverse, there's things we talked about where I can test my ideas, I can start in kind of soft, but also one of the things I really appreciate is the idea of I could test while working for somebody else. Mm-hmm. Whether that is I'm in a relationship, like a professional relationship with my employer, and I can have a conversation that says, I have this great idea. Can I test it out here? Mm-hmm. Or it's the idea, one of the resources that's listed is Angel Co. And Angel Co. is a place for startups. So you could be working with somebody else on their startup, have that learning space, and start reducing that risk and kind of let you test out what it is you really want to do too. So we will close. Thank you so much, Josh, for joining us. Thank you, Dee Dee, for sharing about URI, Innovate, Launch Lab, and jumping in with all your great pieces of advice. Our next session is on Thursday with Scott Asadorian from URI and Emily Zaccardi, who has a company called Holler Hype, which is a tech company. And then we have Javanya Allen, who's on Friday, talking about resources. So this week, all resources you can take advantage of today. I will send an email tomorrow with the recording and resources. And thank you to you all. It is 8 o'clock on Tuesday. I am sure there's lots of things you want to do, and we really appreciate you taking the time with us. Take care, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Audra. Thanks, everyone.